А там ще такі диплом.
So, hello, dear colleagues. Just a second, we'll wait till everybody will join us. Отже, колеги, доброго вечора ще раз. Перед тим, як ми, власне, перейдемо до нашого заходу, одне невеличке технічне питання. Для того, щоб прослуховувати захід українською мовою, оберіть внизу кнопку у вигляді глобусу та оберіть, власне, мову, яка вам зручна. Це українська або англійська. So, hello everybody. I'm glad to see you, and I'm glad to present you our today's speaker is Barbara Oakley, professor of Auckland University. And before we'll start our today's meeting, I want to give floor to Bogdan Ferenc, founder of Progresильні community. Bogdan, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, dear Dmitro, dear Barbara, dear team of Прогресильні. Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Дійсно радий сьогодні вас вітати. Я скажу декілька слів на українській мові і перейду на англійську, так як в нас сьогодні двомовний наш захід. Я радий дійсно, що сьогодні у нас є така можливість прокачатися, обмінятися найкращими практиками з пані Барбарою. Це дуже важливо, особливо коли ми відчуваємо наслідки війни російської. Тому я сподіваюся, що те, що ми і Дмитро допоміг ініціювати таку зустріч сьогоднішню, нас буде надихати і мотивувати викладати краще, викладати якісніше і ділитися найкращим цим досвідом з усіма нашими колегами. Я перейду на англійську мову, щоб ще також Барбара змогла почути декілька слів, але у нас є переклад, також нагадаю, ви можете вибрати собі в налаштуваннях Zoom. Really, today we are facing a big challenge, a challenge of Russian war, and I think that our teachers, Ukrainian teachers, are suffering a lot from this war. That's why it's a big pleasure to have you today, dear Barbara, with us, and we hope to share with you best practices, how we can use these techniques, and how we can use online methods in education processes, despite the war, despite the challenges that now we are facing. Progresильні is a community of progressive teachers, and we are happy that we have this opportunity to unite these progressive teachers and to make a better quality of education, because we believe that Ukraine deserves much more better education, and Ukrainian students, pupil, teachers are the core of this process. That's why I wish a fruitful discussion, a good mood, and use this opportunity that we created together. Thanks a lot. I will pass the floor to Dmitro. Dmitro, please.
Thank you, Bogdan. Now again, I want to introduce to you our today's speaker, Barbara Oakley, superstar from education, professor of Auckland University, and author of the most popular massive open online course, learning how to learn on Coursera. Hello, Barbara, and thank you for being with us today. And I want to say one more word, and thank you again for your support of Ukraine. Actually, Barbara was the first person abroad who wrote me on 24th of February with supporting words and with supporting Ukraine. So thank you for that. It was thank you, and thank you for everything you already did for Ukraine. So Barbara, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, I'm so honored to be here, and I am so supportive of everything that you are doing to help make the lives of Ukrainians better in this very difficult time. So I have some uplifting news for you, or information for you, and let's see if I can get to. Hang on, just a minute. I would like to get. Let's see. Where is the? Okay, so. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we should be having my screen is being shared. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So it is my with great thanks to Dmytro Chumachenko and to Bogdan Ferenc, and thank you all for your work. So let's get started, because we have lots of information to share about effective teaching and effective learning during difficult times. So we should begin by noting, well, what is learning? So it's not just all mush up in our brain. Our brains have very organized ways of making sense of the information that we are learning. And a big way that we make sense of that information is by using the basic building block of the brain, which is the neuron. So I'm going to give you a little tiny bit of neuron terminology here, but don't worry, you don't even need to remember this. So neurons, they have these legs, and those are like what you can see right here, these 3 legs. So I think we have a little bit of interference from, okay, there we go. And these legs have toes on them, and those are like spines, and those are called dendritic spines. So here's a little dendritic spine, you can see right here. And finally, neurons have an arm that reaches upwards, and that arm is called an axon. So, so there we go. That's all you need to know about neurons. You might wonder, why do I even need to know this? But you'll see, it'll help you understand how students learn and how you can help them learn better. So we know that when students, or when anyone is learning something, what they're doing is they are creating sets of links between neurons in long-term memory in the neocortex, scattered around the brain. So this means whether you are learning verb conjugations in Ukrainian or Spanish or English, you are making connections in long-term memory. If you're learning to skateboard, if you're learning how to play a musical instrument, no matter what you're learning, if you learn it, you've created links in long-term memory. Sometimes you have been told, you don't need to remember it, you can always look it up. That's not true. Would I be able to speak Ukrainian if I was just using Google Translate to look it up? Of course not. So there are some fundamental key things, even complicated things, that we need to have in our long-term memory if we are going to actually become experts in whatever we're learning. Now, as we are learning something, as we practice, those connections strengthen. So ultimately, those connections are kind of like links in a chain or a necklace. The more we practice with those links, the stronger and richer those links become. So this brings me to a question for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you 4 techniques for learning. And I'm going to ask you which one is the most efficient. So hopefully we have a poll together that we can launch after I give you the 4 options. So a typical thing people do when they're learning is rereading. I mean, that's practice of sorts. Or you can highlight or underline the key idea on the page. You can use something called retrieval practice or recall, which is like using a set of flashcards to retrieve or recall the key idea and then check and see whether you knew the answer. Or there's something called a concept map, where you write down the key concepts and then you tie those concepts together. So which one of these 4 is by far the best approach to help you with your learning? Were we able to get our poll together? Is that possible to launch? Mitro, any luck? Let's see. Okay, I think it's sort of okay. I think we can go in here, and I don't have my phone with me, darn it. So hopefully you can all try this, and hopefully afterwards you can share the results of this poll. So go ahead and vote. Which one do you think is the best? How many responses, what % of responses do we have, Dmitra?
Just a second, because actually, just a second.
I'm so curious to see how well Ukrainians do. Okay. So, okay, now it's living and breathing. So creating a concept map is in the lead. And we have retrieval practice is behind, and underlining. Okay, and so rereading, nobody voted for that. I was very good at rereading.
I think that we have some problem with force variant.
Okay. Well, let's see. I think we've got a pretty good percentage here that's fairly representative. So we've seen that creating a concept map is the most popular of all techniques. So let's go back. Let's see. I think I need to reshare my screen. And we'll go back here. And okay, so hopefully you see okay, are you all ready for the final answer? I hope. Okay, the answer is that it's retrieval practice. It's the one that got the least of the 3 that had any votes. This technique for learning is by far the best technique to be able to help you learn. And the reason for it is when you're first learning something. So for example, right now you're focusing, you're paying attention, and weak links are being laid in long-term memory. But each time you think about those ideas, you draw them back to mind. What was that Oakley, what did she say was the key idea for learning? every time you remember, you retrieve those key ideas, it strengthens those sets of links. So why is this better than concept mapping? Because so many people voted for concept mapping. The thing is, you can always tell individuals who have been exposed to pedagogical theory, because for decades, pedagogical theory has stated that concept mapping is the best way to learn something. There was just one problem. No one ever compared concept mapping with those other techniques, including retrieval practice, rereading, and underlining. So when they actually made the comparison and they published the results in the journal Science, which is one of the world's most prestigious journals, what they found was that by far the best approach to help students learn was retrieval practice, far better than concept mapping. And you can begin to see why now. I mean, concept mapping is just like note-taking. I mean, note-taking is good, but it doesn't help get that information into your long-term memory and reinforce those links in long-term memory. And retrieval practice does do that. So note-taking is great if you review and you use retrieval practice to remember the key ideas. Anything you can do to retrieve key ideas is what is going to strengthen the learning that you have done. So hundreds and hundreds of papers have shown the incredible value of retrieval practice and how much better it is than concept mapping, rereading, or underlining. The great thing is that you can do retrieval practice anywhere. So let's say that you are taking a shower. You can do retrieval practice. What were the key ideas that you covered in something that you're learning? You're riding a bus somewhere. You're going, any place where you're just kind of being a little bit mind wandering, you can do some retrieval practice. Sometimes you may watch, for example, a teacher in class or a video that you've been learning from, and you're just finished. Okay, you think it's all there in your mind. It's not. When you retrieve it the first time, it'll feel really easy if you've just learned that material, but it will really help you to do that retrieving, even though it's super easy. If you don't do that retrieving, if you learn something and then let it sit for a couple days, a couple weeks, what happens is your little synaptic janitor can start connection for you. So here's an example of this. You are all budding neuroscientists now. So here's an example of a neuron. This is a dendritic spine, so it's the leg of that neuron. And this is a dendritic spine before learning and before sleep. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the difference between that neuron, that dendritic or that dendrite before learning and before sleep, and the exact same living dendrite after learning and after sleep. Can you imagine what that new dendrite is going to look like? Is it going to be fatter? Is it going to have more dendritic spines? What do you think that dendrite is going to look at like after learning and after sleep? As it turns out, it has some more dendritic spines. So if you look at this blue triangle right here, as opposed to right up here before learning and before sleep, you can see there was no spine before learning and before sleep. But learning and sleep helped to create a new connection, and it actually strengthened that connection. In fact, we know that during sleep, your brain will go over some connections hundreds of times, and that will allow those connections to strengthen. This is why sometimes you will go to sleep and your you're not, you're sort of confused. Let's say you're trying to learn to say a sentence in a foreign language. And then you wake up in the morning and it's easier to say. Why? Because your brain was practicing in your sleep. Now, an important point is do your studying during the day. But if you want to give it an extra little boost right before you go to sleep, don't do your studying then, but just write those 2 or 3 minutes before you go to sleep. Get in mind the key idea you want to remember or to understand better. Just keep that idea in mind. This will signal to your brain, those are the ideas I want you to be practicing with. And it will help make your learning more efficient because it will practice more during sleep. So there's a kind of hand in hand with retrieval practice is an approach called spaced repetition. That means doing your retrieval practice over a number of days. So a good approach to learning is to space out your learning so that you're retrieving over a number of days. If you have 5 hours, for example, to study, do 1 hour per day of studying rather than 5 hours of cramming in one day. Those connections don't have sleep to strengthen them, and they will be swept away more easily. They're weaker. But if you have studied by, spacing out your learning, you learn for an hour on Monday, sleep on it, that helps strengthen. Learn for an hour on Tuesday, sleep on it, that helps strengthen it, and Wednesday and so forth. So what that'll do is that will build and strengthen those connections. Let's say that you're learning physics. Learn what you can in that first hour. Then the next day, learn, review what you had and expand and build on it. And you'll find that what you learned the day before seems to make more sense as you're growing through that physics that you're learning. If you are learning a foreign language, let's say you have 100 words to learn by that Friday. You might think, I'm going to learn 20 words a day for 5 days. No, try to learn 100 words the first day. And you can't, you'll do your best. But that gives you more days to review those words. So if you have 100 words the first day, review them again the second day, the third day. And by the 4th and 5th days, you'll be seeing that actually, even though it was 100 words, you're doing pretty well with them. I like to use metaphors to help us understand things. And a good metaphor for learning is that it's like building a brick wall. You lay a layer of bricks, some mortar, bricks, some mortar, and before the wall goes too high, you rest. You let that mortar dry. Before the wall goes too high, you rest and then continue. If you do it all at once, your wall will have a very, very poor foundation for learning. So learning just takes time. That's the way it is. It's kind of like a weightlifter. It took time for him to build that kind of muscular structure. We can see it in an athlete. We can't see inside the brain to know that neural tissue is similar tissue. It's excitable tissue, just as muscular tissue is, and it takes time for it to grow that structure. So since we are on athletes, let me introduce you to my favorite athlete of all time. His name is Julius Yego. And Julius is, he's from Kenya. If you know anything about Kenya, you know that it is famous for its long distance runners. So Julius had, the thing is, he did not want to become a long distance runner. He wanted to learn to throw the javelin. And that's that spear. But there were no javelin throwing coaches in all of Kenya, and he couldn't afford to go overseas and study. So he began watching YouTube videos and learning, and he would watch and learn, watch and then go out and practice. So learning, practicing, learning, practicing. And do you know that in this way, 98% of the time, he won the world championship in throwing the javelin. Now, Julius was a very, very intelligent man. And some of the ways that he used, some of the things he used to approach his learning is going to help you with your learning, because you're in a really tough situation right now. So even with things like knowing how to disassemble a rifle, how do you do that quickly? Julius can give us insights in the kind of learning that you need to do sometimes for the kind of situation you're in. You can't think sometimes about what you're doing. You must be able to take critical action. So Julius, as I mentioned, he would look at a video, a YouTube video on how to throw the javelin. Then he would go out and practice. And so what he was actually doing was he was mixing together two approaches that we now understand are really important for learning. He was mixing lecture, which is when he was watching those YouTube videos, with active learning, which was when he was going out and throwing the javelin, the spear. By mixing these two approaches, he was able to become the world champion. But those two approaches are actually related to two fundamentally different ways that the brain learns. So we know, we talked a little bit before about how the brain has, it creates sets of links when you're learning. But what I didn't mention was the sets of, there's two different pathways that your brain can use to create those neural links. You might wonder, why is she explaining this to us? It's because those two different types of links allow you to have different skills when you're learning. So I'm going to give you a few terms, a little bit of nomenclature, but I don't want you to worry. You don't need to remember these names. You just need to remember there's two different ways to learn. So that first way of learning takes information from working memory, where we're thinking consciously in the prefrontal cortex, takes that information through the hippocampus and stores it in long-term memory. The second way of learning is the information goes through the basal ganglia into long-term memory, and that's called procedural pathway. So we need both pathways in order to be able to learn effectively and efficiently. So the thing is, what's going on is what you learn through that basal ganglia, you can do without even thinking about it. You learn how to assemble a rifle after you've cleaned it through that basal ganglia because you've done it often enough, and you can do it in the dark without even seeing what you're doing. You know exactly what you're doing, and it's like a habit. You could do it without any thought whatsoever. Declarative learning through the hippocampus, you must consciously think of whatever you're doing. So if you don't know how to, if you haven't practiced and really gotten how to do some kind of physical activity like assembling or disassembling a rifle, you can't do it without thinking about it. But you want to be able to do it without thinking about it, particularly in times of stress. That's why practice over and over again can be so valuable, because it moves. You first learn how to disassemble a rifle, like through the declarative, you're conscious of it. You do it enough times, you create those procedural sets of links. But let's just say you are a teacher of elementary school students. What does this have to do with how you teach? Easy. When you are teaching the multiplication tables, you first teach it through that declarative pathway. Students are conscious of it. You practice enough, and students can do the multiplication tables, they can do fractions, they can do algebra, they can build towards calculus, and they can do it easily because they can have that foundation in learn through the procedural system, and it's intuitive. They know it by heart, they don't need to think about it. So these are you want to learn both declaratively, which is flexible, and through the procedural system, which is less flexible, but really fast, and you don't need to think about it. Both of these systems of learning are important for us as teachers in helping our students be successful. So how can you help students learn through both pathways? Well, as I mentioned, I'm just gonna, this is a quick little table that just sort of gives you the difference between those two different pathways. You're not conscious of your procedural learning. Procedural learning develops through practice. You can't explain it very well. So if you know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, you've learned it procedurally. It involves, in fact, complex patterns. Before, people who didn't know the neuroscience because it wasn't yet available always thought, oh, procedural learning is just for rote, simple things. No, it's how you learn to speak your native language. So complex patterns are a fundamentally important thing it helps you do. It can take a lot of practice to learn, but it's fast. It's inflexible. So if I'm learning to type, I can type very well, I can type very swiftly, but if somebody changed the keyboard, it would take me a lot to be able to learn that new keyboard. I do want to give you just a little example here of what happens. Let's see, we're getting I think we're getting a little bit of, okay, so this is a Japanese system of learning how to add numbers called flash anzan. This is learned through the procedural system. So these
Це підхід, який базується на процедурній системі. Ці діти, вони додають тут.
Now watch this little girl and little boy.
Подивіться на цю дівчинку і на хлопчика. Вони буквально зараз додали ці складні цифри. Бачите, як вражає? То це те, що відбувається, коли вони вміють
play word games when they know something very well procedurally. So there's a word game in Japanese called shiritori, which is basically you want to get like whatever that class of symbols is in. You want to start the other person starts the next word with a similar.
Наступна людина має почати з того ж самого класу символів, з тої самої літери слова. І зараз ми подивимося і побачимо, як дівчата грають у цю гру слова, але одночасно вони додають цифри, і у них виходить. Чи ні? Давайте попробуємо подивитися, тому що у цій грі на слова там декларативний більш задіяний спосіб.
爪、メダカ、カメ、目玉焼き、17,602。
There we go. Pretty
Ось
cool.
бачите, як вражаюче. Отже, процедурний цей шлях навчання дуже потужний. Якщо ви будете це знати, ви зможете і інші складніші речі робити.
Just as a quick little review.
Зараз хочу зробити таке невелике повторення. Ці дві системи, вони якраз проявляються в захворюваннях, де протиставляються ці дві системи навчання. Наприклад, хвороба Паркінсона, вона передбачає пошкодження чи проблеми в базальних гангліях. Тобто процедурна система, вона проблематичною стає. А в хворобі Альцгеймера якраз це проблема з декларативною системою. Тобто, наприклад, у мого батька була хвороба Альцгеймера.
Not remember the word Alzheimer's, and he would be standing in front of a clerk in a store, and he was trying to explain why he couldn't speak so eloquently. He would draw his hat down and look under the bill of his hat. He had the word Alzheimer's. So what he was doing was he had a procedural movement, and he could read procedurally that word. So even though his hippocampal system was being destroyed, he could actually still communicate. So there's ways that you can use one system to balance for others. Interestingly, those with dyslexia often prefer to learn more declaratively, whereas those who are on the autistic spectrum can prefer to learn more procedurally, and they can be really good at it. So as you're teaching, just remember retrieval practice helps with both declarative and procedural learning, spaced repetition with both. And a explanation such as I'm giving here now is actually very helpful for declarative learning, whereas procedural learning, interleaving is really, that's like a mixture of different kinds of assignments. So if you have negative binomial and geometric, for example, when you're teaching in statistics, you might interleave those three different concepts. So all of these kinds of things, can help you with your learning. I can see I've gone about 35 minutes here. Let's see. I have so much more, but I'm thinking that I probably should leave time for questions. So
Actually, we are flexible. So if you have more time than 1 hour for presentation plus questions, I think you're welcome.
Oh, okay. Well, then I will continue on and just share a little bit more because I think it's really helpful. So as when you're talking about things, so we're just gonna, you're living through a difficult time. So I just want to be really honest about things. When you are field stripping a weapon, you want to get that into that procedural, anything that you can do that's going to save lives. You want to get people to be able to do it without even thinking about it. They've practiced it enough that they have those procedural links, they're in mind, and they can do things habitually without even thinking about it. It takes lots of practice, but it can definitely save lives. How do links become procedural? It turns out that there is a little part of the prefrontal cortex called the infralimbic cortex. And that watches, and it just sees if you do something a lot of times with that declarative system. And when it does it, when you do something enough times, it will create a new set of links through that procedural system. For example, when you first, let's say you move to a new location and you're going from work to your home, at first you have to think declaratively about it. But then as you do it enough times, you create that set of links. And that set of links is what it creates those procedural links. And you can go home, find yourself at home, and you don't even think about how you got home. So that's because you've laid those procedural links. So I do want to talk about the feel-good molecule, which is dopamine. And dopamine arises when you have unexpected rewards. So dopamine there's dopamine molecules right here in this part of the brain, several different systems. And what happens is those dopamine molecules will, they can go around to different parts of the brain, sort of wherever you've had something that was in a rewarding experience. So I show it squirting out everywhere, but actually it's going to home in on certain particular areas of the brain. In fact, what they have found is that mice that have their little dopamine systems inactivated can't learn anything new. So dopamine has something really powerful related to our ability to learn. Here is the trick for you. The trick is, let's say you hate what you're learning. You don't want anything to do with it. This trick is you sit yourself down and you tell yourself, I love this stuff. I really love it. Because if it's really important, you want yourself to feel like you love it and make a question about something. You can trick your brain into thinking you love this stuff, even if at first you really did hate it. So let's say you're tricking yourself. You're going, I love this stuff. And then you go, you figure out some question. Let's say you're trying to solve a problem. So you're trying to get this problem solved, and the first time you try to solve it, you don't. But you're a little curious because you made yourself be curious about this one problem because you told yourself you're so excited about this. So you do it again. You try again to solve this problem, no luck. So you try again, no luck. Then you try yet again, and you solved it. That eureka feeling of, I solved this thing, sprinkles dopamine along that pathway, that most recent pathway where you've learned, and it strengthens that pathway. And that indeed is how you learn something new, is that dopamine allows you to strengthen those particular neural connections that led to your being able to solve that problem. So we should talk a little bit about connections and new connections. So here's just a different set of neurons that are illustrating this idea of connecting and learning. What happens if you have new neurons that don't connect to anything? What happens is something like this. Those neurons will die. If they don't have connections, there's no reason for them to connect or to live. We used to think, neuroscientists used to think back in the 80s and 90s that your brain was born with all neurons it would ever have. And then as you got older, they die off and you'd get senile. And it was a really depressing way to look at the world. But fortunately, it was completely wrong. We now know that new neurons are born every day, especially in the hippocampus. And those new neurons, what happens is they come and they link in to the lattice, and it helps you feel better. So as it turns out, there's something, so we can tell why we feel better. new neurons have something magical within them that help them to make you feel better. And it's a very interesting area that's getting a lot of attention in research. So new neurons, you want to have new neurons because they help you learn better than older neurons, but they also help you feel better. So new neurons, what's happening is that they come in and they stay in the lattice if they have a reason to. In other words, if you are learning something new, those new neurons they're forced to connect in, survive, thrive, grow, and help you feel better. So you can see Progresильні helps you to actually feel better. Interestingly, in the United States, during COVID, they shut down new learning in many school systems in many states throughout the country. Then what evolved after that? Significant rates of depression. You, as a teacher, do enormous good within the society to help people feel better, particularly when there's really, really tough times right now. Just remember to differentiate experiences. Remember, we talked about the importance of retrieval practice. So stressful experiences that make people feel bad, you do not want to talk about those because that's retrieving that information. And remember,
говорити про цього, бо ви пам'ятаєте, що ми таким чином витягуємо на поверхню цю інформацію, і вона посилює цей досвід. У США
And this, according to this therapy, you would talk to the person right after the traumatic experience and try to draw out of them, get it out of them so that they would feel better. Except nobody had ever tested critical incident stress debriefing to see if it actually helped people. And when they did test it, they found that not only did it not help people, it actually made people frequently feel worse. So when it comes to stressful experiences, it's best to avoid that. You don't want to retrieve those memories. But new and positive learning, absolutely, you want to be retrieving that information. So I just want to give you a little bit of a pep talk if, like me, you are a slow learner. Slow learners often, they can't remember as easily. So, and what's happening is those little dendritic spines, they make connections, but then they forget. I mean, I forget really easily. And whereas like some of my colleagues with incredible memories, they've got a differing bath of neurochemicals, they don't forget. And but the thing about someone like me, who's a slower learner, who forgets, has to review things, is watch. When I learn something, I forget, and then I have to go over it again the next day, but it's in a little bit of a different configuration. As it turns out, I can actually learn more flexibly. Like if I learn that I was thinking a certain hypothesis was true, and then I look at the data that come out and I forget kind of, a little bit, and I re-examine the next day what that hypothesis was. And I'm like, hey, guess what? I was wrong. I can be more flexible about what I was learning. If I'm a diagnostician as a doctor, I can jump to conclusions about, if I'm a really fast learner, I remember all of the different diagnoses, and I can say, this is what the disease that this person has. But if I'm not so fast a learner, what I can do is I think, oh, you know, there's this hypothesis about what this person has, but I think over it for several days, and I flexibly reshape how I'm thinking about it. So my conclusion about what that disease, what the diagnosis of that disease actually is, can be better than the super smart, fast learner who jumps to conclusion and then can't change their mind. This can even be in war strategies. Generals can jump to conclusions. This is what their strategy is, and inflexibly be unable to change their mind when little bits of other information give hints that that may not be the real strategy that the opposition is using. So it's super important to be able to be, to learn, but also be flexible with what you're learning. So this is why, in fact, we need both fast race car learners who are generally fast about being able to learn things, but they can be inaccurate and inflexible. And we also need kind of slower hiker learners who can be, they're slower, but they're more accurate, and they can be more flexible in whatever they're learning. So this, I just must bring your attention as I close to my hero in science, who is Santiago Ramon y Cajal. He was a slow learner, terrible at school, but gradually, through lots of retrieval practice, became a professor of anatomy after flunking the test several times. Then he won the Nobel Prize, and now he's known as the father of modern neuroscience. And he said, I was no genius, and he was not a genius, but he said, I have worked with many geniuses. And the challenge with geniuses is they can jump to conclusions, and when they're wrong, they inflexibly cannot change their minds. So if you, like Ramon y Cajal, are no genius, rejoice, because in these difficult times, you must be able to learn and be flexible. So my very, very best, and my heart is with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. It was very interesting, and I'm confident that it was very useful. So I want to say that you can ask your question in chat in Zoom. Also, you can ask your questions in comments in Facebook. And so I will start with my question. You showed us a lot of techniques. I wanted to ask about retrieval practice. How can you evaluate the effectiveness of such technique in the context of the psychological crisis caused by the war?
Okay, so it depends a little bit on what you mean by evaluate. Often retrieval practice is meant to be like a personal way of checking before you get to big tests. So, so for example, I use a retrieval practice program called I Do Recall. Let me see if I can pull it up here. What you can, and actually this was developed by a Ukrainian team, so that's part of why it's so good, of course. And this is my favorite retrieval practice. Let's see. Let's see. So here we go. This is I Do Recall, which you can see here. And let's see if I can log in, and then you can actually see oh, let's see, let's see, oh, okay, so it's updated, come on, okay. So you can see, here's different things that I'm trying to learn. So for example, I'm gonna go to Nepal. They use our textbook on common sense teaching, which has a lot of neuroscience, and it turns out that they they really like the neuroscience in the Buddhist monastery. So I'll be speaking there. And so I have some, I'm reading some mindfulness papers. See, notice this little plus right here. What I can do is I can drag in a document, a PowerPoint, a PDF, an image, or whatever, and I can create a flashcard from it. So I use this flashcard system to help me in my day-to-day learning, and I can check myself. So let's see if I can, let me see. So I've got dopamine here. Let's see if I can get this, I'm gonna start. So I can just check. So blinking, what does blinking regulate? Well, let me check here. The amount of information going into my central nervous system. Okay, well, I didn't do very well. So default mode network, and then I can enter in, where the, I can either do it in my head or I can enter in responses here. So you can see here's the different, so I can just create and I can check and see how well I know something. Oftentimes when I first create these flashcards, I'm sitting there thinking, I know this stuff inside and out, but I can't remember it if I check it the next day. And the great thing about this flashcard system, and there's lots of different, like this is my favorite. And the reason it's my favorite is because, let's see if I can get back to the library here. You can, let's see, it's not only PDFs and so forth, but you can actually enter in YouTube videos and create flashcards through YouTube videos. But let's just go here, and we've got a PDF. I'll show you how easy it is to create a flashcard with this PDF. Come on. Okay, so going right here. You're sorry, I'm sure that I add. So if I want to create a flashcard, I can grab some text and so let's see, I go right here, I create a recall, and notice how whatever text I grabbed is right here in this lower part, and then I can take that, put it up here, create a question from it, and then I've got the answers, I can rephrase down here. And so basically I can go wherever I'd like to and create a recall, from this text that I'm reading. But I can also do this. I'm looking for some of my YouTube videos that I, let's see. So, I think I can, let me see, get here, and then I'll go over here, and let's go here, and let me see, come back here. I think I can pull it right up. Okay. Thank you, see answer. Okay, so I can go right to the source, and the source from where
they all carry
was from my favorite Andrew Huberman, who has a really good podcast on neuroscience. So I can link to whatever source using this. So I do recall is my favorite. Other really commonly used flashcard systems are things like Anki, Kahoot, and Quizlet are some of the other big popular ones. So this is a super easy way to just check. Did you actually, remember this stuff? So you can use, and again, you can do retrieval practice almost anywhere. And you can just check yourself. One of the things that people have found is most effective for helping you do well in subjects you're learning is to take plenty of practice tests. And what is retrieval practice using these kinds of flashcards? It is giving yourself plenty of practice tests that you're devising yourself so they, it doesn't affect your grade or something like that. You might say retrieval practice, you know, that you say retrieval practice isn't the best. It's teaching others that is the best thing to do for you to learn. But teaching others is retrieval practice. So in almost anything that you do that helps with your learning, you know, in this way, that's a good technique. If you really look at it and follow it, it's actually retrieval practice.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to talk actually a bit about the Russian war in Ukraine and the education. So there are different cases of education during military operations in the world. Starting from Syrian one, when during 11 years after the start of the war, like 2.5 million children didn't start education at all. And finishing like the Israel case, where despite living in war condition, the country was able to build effective, innovative educational system. So should Ukraine today adapt to someone else's experience, or do we need to develop our own solutions with an eye on the war specifics and technologies available?
So I think that Ukraine is an extraordinary country. The solutions that you will develop that will be based on solid neuroscientific insights will be the very best for your country. Keep your eye on the future. Realize that it is important to keep your educational infrastructure alive and do everything you can to help continue to help people learn and grow, because that will help keep the country from falling into disarray. It will help, you know, with a cohesiveness. It will help keep people's spirits boosted, and it will keep you prepared for when the war ends, and it will, and you will be successful. It will help you to be able to much more quickly move into a good future for Ukrainians.
Thank you. Actually, a month, I think, ago, we discussed with our colleagues from Прогресильні community about the education system. Should it be rebuilt, or should we think about the future and build something new based on new concepts and new approaches? What is your opinion on that point?
Okay, it is, you will always have teachers who have been trained in the previous methods. You do not want to ignore these wonderful teachers, but you do want to try to help all teachers so that they have a good grounding in what we know from neuroscience is best for learning. So I don't think it's possible to just ignore everything of the past and then try to move into the future. But what is possible is, for example, the kinds of information I'm sharing is it's very well grounded and is extremely helpful for teachers. And it's all available for free on Coursera for Ukrainians. So there's a specialization called Uncommon Sense Teaching that has 3 courses in it. From my perspective, a really good thing to do is to make sure that all teachers are trained in these new, well-grounded in science approaches. You can do that for free through the Uncommon Sense Teaching information that's available on Coursera. Use the best of what is developed in the past just in that you can't throw everything out. You have systems of, you have buildings of schools, some of which are still there. You'll have teachers, try to build on the infrastructure, but change the knowledge base. So turn more to a more visionary and up-to-date approach to teaching teachers. And that is what is going to make the big difference in helping Ukraine's education to be progressive.
Great. Actually, that's what we are doing now. So the next question is about actual distance learning. A lot of Ukrainian school children and students today started learning online, unfortunately. And despite the long experience of distance learning during the pandemic, many people still don't trust the quality of the online format. What do you think about it? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of online learning over the offline?
So I'll just be very honest with you. Keep in mind that many professors and teachers, their entire experience and past has been with face-to-face teaching. That's what they're used to. That's what they love. And it feels extremely uncomfortable for them to go into a new online world. More than that, they worry that maybe they could lose their job. If there's better teachers online, maybe more students will go to that. So the result of these feelings are that many teachers and professors will say, online learning just isn't as good. No, it's just not. I have actually seen a world leader in massive open online courses. He's one of the biggest researchers in the world, and he thinks that massive open online courses are not very good. And he gave a half-an-hour lecture on how these courses are just not very good. A half-an-hour lecture, he stood and talked to us, and he had a picture of his book beside him. That was what he did for half an hour. That is about the worst way you can possibly teach online. His whole experience is that online is bad because he doesn't know how to teach online effectively. So he is biased against it. If you look at the research results, students can learn not only just as effectively online, they can learn even more effectively online. Why? You don't have to waste hours getting up, going on the bus to school. You don't have to wait while the professors are, trying to adjust the overhead projector, or somebody is talking on somebody. I mean, you can actually, especially with asynchronous video courses, it is well done. Courses can be far, far better than face-to-face. And keep in mind too, half of all teachers are below average. So that means half of all face-to-face teachers are below average. But online, you can pick the very best of teachers. So I would say a great thing to do, and this is what I'm seeing from the top countries in the world. For example, I'll be speaking in Singapore on November 7th. They have really no natural resources. It's all knowledge-based economy. So what they have done, they have been through the SARS epidemic. They know what it's like when bad things can happen. And they have made it so that their country has an educational system that is hardened, that if something bad happens, like an epidemic, like a war, like anything that can happen that's bad, they have a good set of online teaching material. They've forced universities to and high schools to always have good online materials. I look at some online materials and I am just appalled at how bad it is. So if you look at those free courses, from Uncommon Sense Teaching, there is a course there. It will launch on the 4th. So on 4 days from now, it will be launching. It's on teaching online. And it is how to create really high quality educational materials that include things like showing the instructor's hands so they can draw you in, because what your hand motions do actually trigger mental reactions that help you grasp and understand the materials more easily. You can have unexpected things that really draw people's attention. A little bit of humor can go a long way in making, boring classroom material vibrant and exciting. Students can be like rats in a cage. They'll keep watching the video because they know that sooner or later something funny is going to result. So I would say put emphasis on improving your online teaching within Ukraine, because it is going to be so important. You want to be like Singapore, using it to harden the infrastructure of your country. And that educational system is an infrastructure that is just as important as bridges and buildings and all those kinds of things. So online learning, just keep in mind that lots of people are biased against it because they're afraid of it. They're afraid it will impact their career. But for the country itself, for Ukraine to be successful in the future, you want, like Singapore, to grab and be excellent at online teaching so that people really get as much out of it as they can.
Great, thank you. So colleagues, you still have opportunity to ask your questions in chat, and we actually have one question. Good evening. What directions or means would you recommend for the popularization of science among students? Perhaps you have experience.
Now, I'm not sure quite that I understood the question. Can you try that one again?
Some means to popularize the science among students.
Okay, so let's look at a bicycle, teaching about a bicycle, how to ride a bicycle. When students are beginning to learn to ride a bicycle, it's really painful. They fall off, they get bruises and bumps, but students can see ahead to know that eventually it's going to be kind of fun if they know how to ride a bicycle. So what this means is sometimes in math and science, the worst thing you can do is to try to make it really fun. And, so it's like learning to play air guitar instead of playing guitar. What you want is you want to teach really well so that students have a solid basis in things like multiplication tables. They've interleaved, they know algebra really well. Just, get them through. It's like the stage of learning how to ride a bicycle where you fall off and it's painful and it isn't really fun. Because if you can teach them procedurally through plenty of practice, by the time they get into 9th, 10th grade, it becomes easy and you begin to get to the fun stuff. The problem in the West, not in East, not in China, the problem in the West is this idea of, we always have to make learning fun. No practice, because it won't be fun for students, it'll be boring. No, to get them attracted into, really important disciplines like being able to program and computer science, electrical engineering, these kinds of things, you need to teach the fundamentals of math in particular so that it becomes something they don't even need to think about. Then they can go to higher levels and it's easier for them. Right now, they struggle with, knowing how to do the multiplication tables. They're going to struggle with algebra. They're going to struggle even more when they, with fractions and algebra and when they get to calculus. If you make it easy by just giving them plenty of practice so they can do things intuitively, this will help the students to succeed. So, practice, lots of practice, so it becomes natural. Put your best teachers on math and science and technology, because that's really, a good teacher will infect students with their own enthusiasm. Even if they thought they hated whatever that material is, the eye and the facial expressions of good teachers, even through video, will help infect students with that same enthusiasm. So, I'm so enthusiastic about the ability of, just through good teaching, you can get students so that they fall in love with these materials, but just don't sit there thinking, we just have to make it fun and easy to attract more students into doing that. No, make them be successful, and that can involve work, but that's what's going to make them want to be in these disciplines and make good money through their life.
Okay, thanks a lot. I wanted to ask another serious question connected to Russian war in Ukraine. So part of the children in the occupied territories was forced to go to schools where the temporary occupying authorities had changed the language of instruction, historical facts, and value approaches. It imposes Russian colonialist type of thinking and sows propaganda at the head of the children. And when these territories will be returned to Ukraine, it will be more difficult for these children to adapt to the new value approaches of democratic society and the open world. What to do with this so as not to lose our Ukrainian children now under temporary occupied territories?
So what these children are learning is for example, when they're being exposed more to Russian speaking, and Russian ideological perspectives, it is going into their procedural system. So, that's making it kind of hard and inflexible. When these children will come back, your best approaches will be to broaden their minds, expose them to, other perspectives. They will be taught, don't look at other perspectives. They are somehow tainted and evil, and so don't believe other people. But if you can just simply expose, do your best, there's going to be no magic thing that can instantly cure, but exposing to more ideas and helping the children to understand that it's important to look at more than one perspective. They're being taught now, don't do that. But even simply that idea of, in Ukraine, we look at more than one perspective. That's part of who we are as a culture. We're more open, and then kind of go in that way. You don't necessarily want to go in and say, you're wrong, everything you learned is bad. Just start gradually, and open their minds a little bit, gradually, not by disparaging who they are, because that can harden their feelings against Ukraine, but by saying, no, we are open, it's okay, and here's some other ideas, and give them gradually these other perspectives, that they are not receiving right now. So there's going to be no magic, but I think that can help.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to raise another important problem which we faced today. So some of the school children and students continued their education in institutions abroad because they're forced to leave Ukraine. Other ways to effectively integrate them into the new educational space, and how easy will it be to return them to the Ukrainian educational environment in the future, and what is the teacher's role in this process? What can we do to help them to integrate as abroad as in Ukraine in the future?
What I know from reading of history is that ultimately this will turn out to be a blessing for Ukraine, because you'll have these people coming back. You can do whatever you can to attract them back, when the war is done. But you will find that these individuals will bring creative new ideas, new approaches, new perspectives, and these will help strengthen Ukraine. So almost inevitably, what I see from the history, from history itself, when refugees return after wars, the society gets richer and it has more ideas, more creative. So I would just say, there's going to be no one formula for how to help reintegrate back into Ukraine, all of these individuals, but do what you can to attract them back, because they're going to bring some really cool new ideas, approaches, ways of doing things, even if it just ends up, they come back, they go into Ukrainian school system, and then they've got these connections in Holland, because that's where they went, and they are able in 5 years, 10 years, they have a business going on with Holland and Ukraine, and it actually helps the country because they've got these relationships with the people they stayed with, whether it's Holland, Poland, Chile, wherever they've gone. This diaspora is going to help you quite a bit in the future.
Great. So, colleagues, you have the last opportunity to ask your question in chat or under the stream in Facebook, and not to finish with sad but realistic questions. I wanted to ask the next one. You said that all you need to do to learn effectively is to love learning. But I think you talked about conscious people who understand that education is necessary. What to do with students who are not really motivated for studying, to make them fall in love with learning process?
Oh, this is such a wonderful question. And what I'm going to do to answer this question is, because I put a lot of effort into exactly answering this question. And so let me go here and let's see. Let me just get this for you. We've got this, and we've got this. Okay. So what I'm going to do, this is a 7-minute video. It's a super good video. It helps you understand how to change people's motivation, even when they don't have much motivation, even when they have no motivation. There is no magic tool for everyone. But if you change one tiny thing through your own enthusiasm, you can actually motivate a student to learn one tiny little thing. If they learn one tiny little thing because you've been so excited about helping them, then they can learn another tiny little thing. And each time they learn something, let's say that they think, I could never be a teacher who teaches online and creates videos for teaching online. I can never do that. I'm a teacher, but I don't teach online. But you learn one little thing about how a camera works and how to transfer files. Then you learn one other little thing and another little thing. And each time your motivation, identity motivation changes. So it's the question you ask is the most profoundly deep and important one, that it is the center for the entire massive open online course that I'm teaching on how to learn online, but it's also how to motivate your students. And so I would ask if you could please just go to Uncommon Sense Teaching, and you will see the entire course, and then I will, so Sense Teaching. Okay, so I'm going to give you the, this is the first, there's 3 courses. Here's the first one. You go into that and you will see that there's also, it will lead you to 2 more courses. So there is a second one, and hang on, let's see if I can get you the, okay. I'm not answering these questions very quickly, but actually it's just such a wonderful question that, that I put a lot of work into creating a great set of videos that explains the answers, because it's not something that you can just answer like with a, okay, so let's see here. I've got, I'm almost there. Let's see here, come here. And let's see. Okay. Okay. Now, if, here, come here. Oh, of course, it's sitting here thinking about everything.
I think actually we can add the links for which you shared in our mails for all participants
Okay.
with your
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah. And let's see. Yeah, if you can do that and just go to that first one. The third one, however, is Uncommon Sense Teaching, Teaching Online, and that goes deeply into motivation and identity. And what you're really trying to do, what you can do is with that unmotivated student, your own enthusiasm can infect them. That's your best bet. And we explain how to do that in that series of courses.
Great. So we have hand raised. Ivan, you can unmute.
I
Thank
can
you.
do. I have 1 more minute, and then so go for it, Ivan.
Barbara, thank you very much. And as long as you are sharing links, useful links, I will also share a useful link. It is the link for the Telegram channel of Прогресильні. So dear colleagues, please join us, and we will inform and we will reshare all information that we've got from Barbara today. Thank you. That's all for me now.
Thank
Great.
you.
So I want to thank you too, Barbara. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for supporting Ukraine, and thank all the participants and people who watched us in Facebook and will watch the recording of this event. Happy Knowledge Day and Happy New Academic Year for all the Ukrainian teachers. Thank you.
I can hardly wait to be able to return and visit and share even more. You will succeed. Thank you again.
Thank you, colleagues, and see you next event. Goodbye.